Hey there everybody, this is Lee with Creative2xmom, and today's video is going to be what we read in the month of February. So welcome back to my channel. My name is Lee and this is Creative2xmom. This channel is all about homeschooling, parenthood, and thriving in the day-to-day. And part of my thriving journey is having lots and lots of time to read. So today's video is going to be all the books that I read throughout the month of February, as well as our family read-alouds with the kids. Some of these read-alouds were from our school time, and some of them were just from our time in the evening. And as you guys know, I use my library system to the full extent. So some of the books that we read this month, I will have to insert videos because I've already returned them. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with what I read personally throughout the month of February, and the first book I read was a book called You Are a Badass. I happened to find this book on audio, and I tried to listen to it with my kids in the room, but be forewarned, if you do pick up this book, it has quite a bit of language in it. So then I quickly switched to just listening to it in the evenings, and even then, I only listened to the introduction, maybe the entire first chapter. I'm not even sure I got through the first chapter because it was just riddled with a lot of words that I didn't even want to listen to. And as I was going through this book, I thought it was hard to decipher her message. I was looking for a book about just being confident in leadership, being confident in business, and the more I listened to this book, I thought this is just definitely not for me. I'm not even sure I could have gotten through it in print, although that is a possibility. But I'm one of those people that the more poor language you use, the more turned off I am. So this book was definitely not for me, and it wouldn't even be something I would recommend. So coming off of that book, I thought, okay, I really need like a leadership business type book to be reading. And I happened to find Failing Forward by John G. Maxwell on audio as well. This was a much better fit for my personality. In this book, he talks about some of the characteristics that help successful people fail forward, so they can reflect on their failures and find a way to do it better in the future. And he talked about, I believe it was 15 different characteristics of what helps a leader do that versus somebody who just fails and then quits. I found throughout this book he included a lot of examples of people who have failed that you might not recognize right away and think, oh, they've just been successful in their life, everything has gone well. But he kind of told the backstory of how things, maybe they quote unquote failed, and learned from that what sort of characteristic that showed and how they were able to be successful in the future. Really good book, especially if you're looking for sort of a personal development, encouragement, and continued growth. The next book I read in February was called Open Book by Jessica Simpson. This just came out. This is her new memoir. I think it came out at the beginning of February, and my library was getting it. So I was lucky enough to be the first one on the hold list. If you are any sort of Jessica Simpson fan, if you've watched The Newlyweds, if you follow her music or her fashion career, I would definitely say pick this one up. It follows her life from a very, very young age. I think sort of some of the first memories she shares, personally, she was around 5 or 6, and all the way up to present day. Now, I'm not one to always pick up a celebrity memoir, but I've always felt sort of a strange, odd connection with Jessica Simpson because we are a year apart. Our marriages were a year apart. Our careers have definitely not followed the same trajectory, but sort of this weird having grown up in the same era. So I was fascinated by this. She divides her story into 4 different sections, and I would say that would be like early childhood, sort of the young adulthood, newlywed years, her first marriage, post-marriage, post-divorce, building this fashion empire, and then kind of sort of a more modern day, and that's the smallest section, of course. She says a lot of what precipitated this book and her journey was her sort of realization that she had a problem with drugs, alcohol, I guess like stimulants to keep going. And so I thought that was really interesting. Of course, a good chunk of the book is dedicated to sort of that early adulthood, first marriage. I felt like was the biggest chunk of the book. And The one thing that I felt was a little bit of a missed opportunity with this book is that she talks about her addictions, or what started her on this path of wanting to share her story. And as she gets later and later in time, she doesn't share as much. She doesn't go quite as deep, which I can totally understand. But I felt like if that was her mission and her wanting to reach out to others, it was a little bit of a missed opportunity, because she doesn't go very deep into that. She actually goes deeper into things that happened in her childhood, which of course led up to that addiction. She goes deeper into those newlywed years. Very interesting. I felt like it was very honest. Of course, I don't know her personally, so I can't say, that she shares the whole truth and nothing but the truth, but it seemed to be one of the more honestly written memoirs, especially of somebody who's current age. So, yeah, I would recommend it. I think it's really good. Really insightful, gives you a lot of insight to people who've maybe gone through similar situations. She doesn't hold a whole lot back. I felt like it gave a pretty good picture. The next book I read was called The Hope of Refuge by Cindy Woodsmall. You guys know I am a huge Cindy Woodsmall fan, and this one did not disappoint. It is part of the Ada's House novel series, but it's one that I have not read, so it's been out for a while. You follow the story of Karen Moore. She has grown up in foster care, and now she is being stalked by somebody that she knew from that part of her life, and she's on the run. She ends up in an Amish community with her daughter, sort of in hiding, and there's a lot of suspicion and rumors that start to immediately swirl about her. And then when they find out who she is and who she has been related to, there's even more rumor and more suspicion. And so she meets this one man named Ephraim, who initially is very suspicious of her as well, until he starts to realize who she is and remembers her. And so he takes her in, knowing that she just needs a place to be safe, a sort of a refuge, right? And it's all about his journey of helping her to feel safe, helping her to feel accepted, helping her to be accepted in the community. Of course, throughout that, there's also this love story, but I felt like her character especially was really interesting, because you get insight into sort of the foster child mentality and what that would have been like for her to overcome and to trust others and to let her walls down. Really, really good look at that world. The last book that I read personally was another Cindy Woodsmall book. It's called The English Daughter. And this is the story of a couple who, through some very tragic circumstances, the husband and the wife are separated for a time. He's on some heavy pain medication, and he happens to lose this one night. And by losing the memory of this one night, it sort of unravels their lives. There's all this mystery of another woman coming into the picture, and then a child. So you sort of get the picture of how this could unravel very, very quickly. This was a book that I was gifted from the publisher for my review. So I have a full written review that I'm going to link down below. I'm afraid if I keep talking about this book too much, then I might give too much away. As far as what we read with the kids this month, well, we went a little bit crazy in February. February was Black History Month, and I happened to find several titles from our library that I wanted to share with the kids. So we included those into our morning basket time. The first book that we read was Who Was Louis Armstrong? And I have to admit, I don't know a whole lot about Louis Armstrong, so through this book, it was a great way for me to learn about him, as well as about Booker T. Washington. And now that we are at the close of the month, we are reading What Were the Negro Leagues, which my daughter is not especially loving, but my 8-year-old loves this one because we are rolling into baseball season here pretty soon. So it's been a good way to bridge the gap from Black History Month to baseball. Our first read aloud that we did in the evening in the month of February was Ben and Me. This is the story of a little fictional mouse who follows Benjamin Franklin during the American Revolution. And he claims that all of Ben's great ideas, all of his wonderful political events, this mouse, he was the advisor, he was the inventor, he was the voice of reason. It's hysterical. It's a great living history book, a great way of looking at the American Revolution through the eyes of a very unpredictable but very lovable little character. The second book that we read with the kids was called Snow Treasure. This is by Marie McSwiggan. Love this book. Again, great living literature. This follows a family, a small village during World War II, and the Nazi troops have invaded. They are in Norway, and they have sort of shut down the village, and they are using the kids to transport some gold that they have hidden. They take it to the river, and then there is a pickup spot there. The Nazis are not aware of this because they think the kids are just going out and playing. They're taking their sleds every day, and it's sort of the story of how these kids have their own secret mission during World War II. My kids really love this one. In fact, my 8-year-old wanted to know if there was a sequel because it sort of leaves you on a cliffhanger. Don't believe there's a sequel, but I will definitely be checking it out. And then we had 2 audiobooks throughout the month of February. There was Carry On, Mr. Bowditch, as well as The Little Colonel. Mr. Bowditch is the story of a young man who wants to be a sailor, but because of his size, he's sort of prevented from pursuing that career path. And he throws himself into studying the stars and the math behind that and becomes this incredible navigator. Again, really great living literature for a history study. And then we listened to The Little Colonel, which is by Anne Fellows Johnston. Quick listen, it was only about 2 hours. There is some, I would say, historical language in here. There's some reference to African Americans in probably not the best terms. So I think if you're willing to have those conversations with your kids, which I am, we went into talking a lot about history, even how language has evolved since then. But be prepared. If you're not ready to have those conversations, then I would say go ahead and skip this one. So that's all the books that I read in the month of February, as well as what we read with our kids. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know. I'm getting ready to make my spring reading list and getting ready to film that in the next couple of weeks. So I'm looking for suggestions. Love parenting books, love Christian living, and love just to balance that out with some good fiction as well. So leave me a comment, leave me some suggestions. I can't wait to read them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time. Bye guys.